data. I just mentioned something about how they can get access to some tools, but they can't go very deep with that by and large. And they also have trouble with kind of like as the calculator example shows, with doing very exact reasoning or exact data science on problems that require actual like very fine grained attention to detail. Um, if we want large language models to be useful in practice, often we have to sort of spoon feed them detailed instructions about our goals, like why are we doing this? What do we care about? What do we not care about? What are we looking for? Maybe give them some examples of what a good solution might look like and what a bad solution might look like, and maybe, you know, generally just sort of walk them down a path a little bit for what we want. Uh, and so that pattern of strengths and weaknesses might sound kind of familiar. And it's basically because large language models have the same pattern of strengths and weaknesses that just actual humans do, I think. And this is one of the nice things about them. And it's also one of the difficult things about them. So, uh, I'm sure many of you have had the experience where you're interacting with an LLM and you've had that's just like, it's just an amazing bit of success, right? So they've answered exactly the question you had, and they've given you a lot of backup facts, and they're true, and they've conceptualized it sometimes in what seems like a very creative way, and it's just awesome. And then other times you can have these catastrophic failures where it's just like, it's, I don't know, it's just your face palming and it just makes no sense. And frequently you're somewhere in between, right? It's like, okay, that's not exactly what I mean, but you can trittle with it, maybe get better, and maybe it sort of works out, and maybe it doesn't. Um, and much like with people, we often don't know which kinds of response we're going to get on a given problem with a given large language model until we've had some experience on that problem with that large language model. So again, it's just kind of like with humans. So humans are very good at some things and bad at other things, and sometimes humans will kind of BS you a bit if they, they'll be a bit overconfident as well, and you just often really don't know their strengths and their weaknesses until you sort of put them to work. Uh, but the great thing about this, large language models, is that this is a genuinely different sort of breakthrough in computing compared to literally everything that went before. So in computing prior to this, so unlike calculators or computer programming, if you've done any of that, but even the more sophisticated machine learning algorithms and the AI models prior to large language models, all of those required a very high level of precision in how you interact with them. And they were really bad at tolerating ambiguity. The more advanced versions of AIs prior to large language models were better at tolerating ambiguity in the areas that you could point out to them, but they were not good at ambiguity as a whole. Whereas a large language model, you can say a lot of things, you can typo, you can sort of just express kind of what you mean. Um, and it'll often get it right, more or less just like people will do. Like people will try to understand you and they will interpret the things you say charitably by and large, and want to try to figure out your intent. And that makes them, much like people, this flexibility makes them far more error prone. So like calculators, if you get the numbers in there, then you will get the exact answer out that is correct. But it makes them dramatically more adaptable, which is great because the finickiness of dealing with other forms of computing can be difficult, and having a computer that can actually understand what you mean a little bit more is very useful. And of course, this is not totally surprising if you know how large language models are trained. So as it sort of says in the name, they are trained on a very, very, very large set of natural language data. So it's a reasonable fraction of the entire internet and published material in books and articles and research articles. And this is just what they're trained on. So they're trained to think more or less the way that we share our thoughts with each other. So again, it's maybe not surprising that what they end up with at the end of the day is something that has the same kinds of strengths and weaknesses that humans do. And you often hear, like, or I've often heard people call, uh, like, refer to the usefulness of these things as like, well, maybe they're going to replace the sort of lower level entry workers in the workforce. Um, and that's what they do. They can do these things, but you still need to guide them the same way like a senior employee or senior researcher might guide a more junior employee or junior researcher. But I think that's not actually the best way to think about them because, at least in my experience, a more accurate way of thinking about them is that sometimes they are that. Sometimes they behave like a junior researcher. Other times they behave like a extremely accomplished senior researcher, distinguished fellow Nobel Prize person who's maybe drunk and just not really paying attention to the conversation you're having with them. So they're going to miss some context, but they're going to bring in all kinds of things.